Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, after Angela Alsobrooks racks up the trifecta of Maryland Democrat endorsements, will David Trone throw in the towel? Montgomery County bag tax revealed to be a failure as county loses $8.2 million. Will Virginia Governor Youngkin's 15-week abortion compromise impact the future Maryland fight to come? And did Senator Cheryl Kagan interfere with the nonpartisan Rockville City elections? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We are joined by former county council member and president at Rebuilding Together Montgomery County, Nancy Floreen, and secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. In the early days of American politics, it was very important for those running for office to gather as many endorsements from established elected officials and major newspapers as they could. And if that was the way the elections were conducted back in the day, then Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks has the race to succeed retiring U.S. Senator Ben Cardin all tied up. But that's not the way elections are contested and waged in the era of the internet. Nancy, Alsobrooks has endorsements from the creme de la creme of Maryland Democratic Society. Governor Wes Moore, U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen, Congressman Steny Hoyer, Congressman Glenn Ivey, Congressman Kweisi Mfume, and on and on and on. The list is exhausting to contemplate, but her primary competitor, Congressman David Trone, is not dependent on endorsements. And he can, as he has proven before, self-fund millions in slick media during a campaign. Is it too soon to predict who will win the primary?
Well, I don't think David's going to pull out because I just don't think that's in his nature when you have all that money to waste. But I don't think he appreciates the Democratic primary requires people to show up. The people who show up are in Montgomery, Prince George's, Baltimore. That's where the votes are for this. Is just a primary. If he were running for the general now, that might be a different question. But right now, I think she has it hands down. I don't know if those endorsements come with money or support, but it will help her in her effort to raise more money. And in the communities that count in terms of turnout, I think she's going to nail it.
Well, I mean, obviously, those are important endorsements, but they each have their own power base. I mean, Alsobrooks is well known in Prince George's County. Trone is well known in Montgomery County, even though he doesn't represent much more than a small sliver of Montgomery County. But the question is, name recognition and whose endorsements matter the most. Mark, Maryland is a very progressive state, and the attractiveness of a Black woman being elected to the U.S. Senate has great appeal. So, are we suggesting that, Congressman Trone has a tough go of it?
Well, I'm sure he does have a tough go of it, but frankly, I'm kind of old school enough to focus more on the fact that she made a very shrewd endorsement of Wes Moore early in the race last year for governor, and that's a check that she's cashing now, as you mentioned, in terms of endorsements. She clearly also has a base in Prince George's County. So she has a lot of advantages going into that race. But I agree with Nancy. I think David Trone this is what he's had his eye on all along, and this is his shot at trying to be a senator.
Well, exactly, Mark, because the next, Senate seat is occupied by Senator Van Hollen, and he's not going anywhere for any period of time. I think he's only in his second term. So I want to switch, let's take a look back, though, at the Sixth Congressional race, which is being vacated by Congressman Trone. This week, Nancy, April McClain Delaney, the wife of the former 6th District Congressman John Delaney, announced her candidacy as a Democrat in the primary. It's a crowded field. What do you think about her effort?
Again, she's got the Delaney money behind her. Is that going to get her far enough? I'd be hard pressed to say yes. Excuse my dog. The dog does agree with me on this. The real issue is who can stand out in that very, very large crowd. And it's going to waste a lot of Democratic money, certainly, in the primary, which is what we Democrats do. We spend a lot of money eating our own. So that's good news for the Republicans in terms of fundraising. The 6th Congressional District is not Montgomery County, just a bit of it. Most of it, as you know, extends towards a far more conservative crowd. And so the question is, who can get that word out? Even the Democrats, I think, in the rest of the state are not as liberal as the Montgomery County ones. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's going to be an uphill battle for her. But, again, because none of these people are all that well known, she might have as good a shot as any.
Well, Mark, we're not going to turn to the Republicans in the field. We'll still stick with the Democrats. Immediately after Ms. Delaney announced her candidacy, Delegate Joe Vogel, who is also running for the Democratic nomination, attacked her candidacy by saying, "Do you seriously think the answer to the chaos we're seeing in Congress right now is to let another mega millionaire buy the election?" So obviously she's going to be a big target, and that's going to be on her back.
Well, I thought the criticism was kind of amusing since Democrats, both John Delaney and David Trone, have had that seat held by some very, very, very wealthy people. But B, I think that the Democratic majority has benefited from the fact that they had very, very deep pockets to hold that seat when it was very tightly contested. I think of when John Delaney was came very narrowly close to losing that seat, and it was only with his ability to funnel a couple $1 million in TV ads at the very last minute. So money clearly matters in that district, and that certainly gives her an advantage.
So, and this question is open to either one of you. I mean, does it really show a lack of confidence that the Democratic Party has in winning this, seat back and retaining it by her entry into the election? I mean, there's several qualified Democrats running.
Look, the ring only goes around every so often. So you get in or you're not. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. And looking at the choices right now, as I said earlier, I don't think anyone is an obvious leader. And that's going to be the challenge going forward. And I got to say, if you're a member of Congress and don't have to spend all your time raising money, that's a good thing for everybody. Regrettably, that's what most people do.
Any last thoughts, Mark?
Well, I'm looking forward to when we have an opportunity to talk about the Republican side of this district, because as you said, this is a very competitive district. It was designed to be basically 50-50 in terms of enrollment and voting history. So this is going to be a race to watch.
Well, so when's Neil Parrott going to announce, Mark? Give us a headline.
I sat next to him or across from him at a dinner about a week ago, and he and his wife, April, did not give anything away. So I have no idea whether or not he's running.
Okay. Well, we'll have to go on to our next topic. And this is one that, just keep the gift that keeps on giving, as Mark Uncapher said to me a few minutes ago. With great fanfare, the Montgomery County carryout bag tax went into effect January 1st, 2012. And since then, according to the progressive website Vox, nearly 700 jurisdictions in the United States have followed Montgomery County's lead and has passed similar laws and ordinances. Mark, according to MoCo 360, reporting on an Inspector General's report, millions of dollars in plastic bag tax revenue may have been lost because of lax enforcement over the bag tax. So has it been a success?
Well, I confess I went to a supermarket today and I brought a reusable bag, which I might or might not have used So I begrudgingly, Casey, but yeah, I didn't want to pay the 5 cents, and I was only buying a few items, so I have that in my car. So I suppose when that behavior is affected, it's had some positive impact. What can I say? It's begrudging.
Well, you see, it's all about control, Mark. Nancy, Council Member Andrew Friedson said this is a county government that likes to regulate a lot of things, and we have to be able to communicate with businesses on what we're expecting of them. And if we don't know who they are, we can't communicate with them. Is this a big problem? Is the goal the bag? What is the goal of the bag tax? Is it to generate? Is it to generate revenue or change behavior and save the planet?
Well, I was one of the evil council members who voted for this many, many years ago. And I think I did at least. Look, it
I'm sure
actually
you did, Nancy.
has brought in way more money than was expected, which actually is a bad thing. Because the whole point of this was to get people like Mark and yourself to grudgingly bring something to carry your groceries home. And I have to tell you a funny story though. I went to pick up an item at a retail store today, and I was given a paper bag, and I don't think I paid a tax on.
Oh
So
no.
these
We
things
need to
happen.
report them.
I'm not going to tell on them, but the fact of the matter is there are retailers who probably don't know about it or how to apply it. And this was always a little complicated in terms of takeout food and this and that and the other thing. And in the rest of the world, everyone brings their bags to the supermarket. Now, we have been behind the rest of the world in terms of this sort of thing. And to the extent that you can help people behave a little better, a little more caring about the environment, it's okay.
Well, former member of the 21 This Week panel, Susan Heltemus, once bought me a bag that said, "My bag proves that I'm better than you," and so I carry that wherever I go, and in my car, Nancy. Very rarely use it, but I do carry it. When we come back from this short break, Virginia Governor Youngkin, not Yankin, Youngkin, has proposed a 15-week ban on abortions. If this is passed, what impact is this going to have on the ongoing debate in Maryland when it comes up for constitutional amendment in 2024? Stay tuned. And welcome back. In the aftermath of the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court reversing the Roe v. Wade decision, the right whether to allow abortions was returned to the states and has become a political point of controversy. In neighboring Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin has tied Republican hopes for winning the legislative elections next month, just in a matter of days, actually, to the controversial strategy of embracing a new limit on abortion access or eliminating abortion access after 15 weeks. If successful in Virginia, will the strategy be adopted by anti-abortion activists here in Maryland, which during this past legislative session passed a proposed constitutional amendment expanding the right to abortions in Maryland and is going to be part of a constitutional amendment put for the electorate in the 2024 elections. Now, Nancy, since 1992, when Maryland passed its first constitutional amendment protecting the right to abortion in Maryland, the law has been that abortion in Maryland is legal up to the point of fetal viability. And that's usually defined as something around 16 to 18 weeks. It's not a definite number. And then later, if necessary to preserve the life or health of the pregnant person. So is there I never understood why there was a need to change the law to begin with. What do you think?
Well, I am not entirely certain of what the rationale is for putting this back on the table. I think it's a reaction, of course, to what happened at the Supreme Court. And it's a statement to voters in Maryland and to the rest of the world, at least the rest of the country, that abortion is a right in Maryland. Now, I don't think whatever Virginia does is going to affect that. People may certainly pick up that banner that's, that's what happens. But I don't think that's going to change anything. And I don't think it's going to, it just breaks my heart that we're having these debates of 50 years ago, but nonetheless, that's what's happening. I just don't think Maryland is going to change. And I don't think whatever Virginia does is going to change us.
Well, I think the reason I brought this up is that, in the immediate aftermath of Dobbs' decision, there were a lot of different proposals. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham even suggested a federal limitation on abortion of, I believe it was 16 weeks. And whether or not there's a growing movement, because yes, you are absolutely, there was a reaction to Dobbs, and now this may be a counter reaction to that, which is, I think many people are worried that any changes to existing laws opens the door for late term abortions. And I think that's the real question, whether or not the energy garnered in Virginia comes over to Maryland. And Mark, most people, even supporters of abortion, oppose late term abortions. And that's what they're afraid of about the constitutional amendment being proposed.
Well, you're right. That's a flashpoint. I mean, being respectful of very principled people on both sides who either support long-term abortion or want to cut it off at the very beginning. There does seem to be a general opinion, if you look at the opinion poll consensus, at around 15 weeks. And if there's a compromise, it's at that point that is being suggested in Maryland, which is frankly more restrictive than what has been the law in Maryland. I don't see it having very much that, the fact that there is that sense around 15, 16 weeks having an impact in Maryland, because quite frankly, never underestimate the capacity of legislators to offer up laws that are basically redundant and reflect what is an existing law in order to make a statement. And I think that's clearly what's being done here.
Well, but if you can read the amendment that was passed and tell me what it says as to term limits, then on when abortions should be cut off, you're a smarter attorney than I am, because I've reread it twice, and this is what I think anti-abortion activists are going to latch on, is that the vagueness of the law is going to open the door to late-term abortions, something we haven't approved here in Maryland.
Well, Maryland has actually has been less restrictive on late-term abortions than other states, even states like New York that have historically, basically had allowed abortions even before the national change. So Maryland has been farther out on this issue than was previously the case. So that should not be frankly a surprise. That continues to be the policy in the state.
Nancy, I'll let you have the last word.
I wish men could get pregnant. Maybe you might understand. Nobody wants to have an abortion. It's not a desirable outcome for anybody, but sometimes it happens. Yeah, had a niece up in Massachusetts who had to have a late-term abortion because there were serious issues with the baby, and that could have affected her in a big-time way. Who am I to tell her what decision to make? And so, these are not desirable outcomes under any circumstances, but it does happen. And where are all the anti-abortion people when that baby is born with serious issues? Who supports that family? Who supports that woman? Oh, that's another conversation. We'll take care of it in the future. It doesn't happen. So the reality is way different from this academic conversation about when a fetus is viable. Let me tell you that.
Well,
I'll stop right
I
there.
mean, here's the point. The point is, if as you're suggesting, Nancy, and Mark has suggested, that the Maryland law is broader than actually drafted in the Constitution, then why make changes? Why change? Why make changes to a law that's seems to be working for most people? That's really the point. Anyway, We will debate this because it will be brought up next November for the constitutional amendment and for voters to decide. We'll debate it as it percolates along. And on to our last topic, which is, one would think that in a nonpartisan election, it would elicit some sense of decorum from elected officials who are members of an identified political party. This week, it was disclosed that Democratic Maryland House of Delegate member Cheryl Kagan paid for a Maryland mailer endorsing 5 of the candidates in the nonpartisan, unaffiliated Rockville City elections. Mark, should Delegate Kagan have dipped her toes in this election?
Well, full disclosure, Republicans do that in municipal elections as well. By pointing out which candidates are Republicans. So it would be hypocritical to say that she shouldn't be able to do that. I would observe, too, that municipal elections, nonpartisan municipal elections, are very much, how shall I say, the farm team for partisan elections. I can think 1 or 2 examples where that's happened, both in Rockville and maybe even in Garrett Park.
So, Mark, I'm really surprised you didn't use the line from Casablanca that I'm shocked that there's gambling going on in this establishment. Nancy.
Nonpartisan election means it's not party-based. Party affiliation is irrelevant to the contest, but it's still a contest. So you have your signs, you have your T-shirts, you have your whatever people can afford to get their name out, and this is no different. So, bless Cheryl for spending her money like that. Obviously, she doesn't need to save it for herself, she thinks.
Well, I will say that I contacted our election advisor, Jim Shalleck, who was chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and he told me that I had was being ridiculous. So I think we'll just leave it at that. Stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back now with Parting Shots, Nancy Floreen.
So I read a great story about a group in Massachusetts that go out for breakfast every month, and they each leave $100 tip. So that's an idea for people as we go into the holiday season. Leave in a bigger tip in cash for your server. These are folks who can deserve your support, and it's a great way to make somebody smile.
Thank you, Nancy. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I'll echo that, but I'll also remind folks that Halloween is coming up. And so if you're driving around on Tuesday, be extra careful because kids will be out doing trick-or-treating, and sometimes they're not always the best judge of what is the safest way to move from house to house.
And thank you, Mark. And that's a great segue into what I was going to talk about, which is because of Halloween, there are some people who may not have bought their candy already. And I just want to point out that Maryland has seen the highest increase in the cost of candy, according to CNBC News. This isn't Casey Aiken, making this stuff up. Maryland has seen the highest increase at 13.56% since last year. Oh, and across the river in Virginia, it's the lowest. It's only 8.4% increase. So if you haven't bought your candy, go over to Tyson's Corner. For 21 this week, I want to thank you both for being here. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.